Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I have a fantastic and fascinating guest with me today. His name is Jeff Patterson. He has over 36 years experience practicing and teaching meditative and martial arts practices. As the founder of the Northwest Fighting Arts, Portland Tai Chi Academy, and the Yeilding Warrior, he emphasizes the transformative power of meditative and martial arts practices, with an emphasis on the concept of yielding. He is also the author of 3 published books, as well as hundreds of instructional videos. Jeff, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
It's an honor to have you. And of course, you're talking about, well, at least one of my favorite subjects, which is martial arts. So, and then meditation is something I've struggled with for a really long time. So, I want you to begin by letting us know how you got interested in martial arts at the very beginning and just what the journey was like to bring you to this point.
Yeah, so I've always been interested in the martial arts as a kid growing up. I was brought up in a single parent family, and we didn't really have the financial means to follow that interest. And so it wasn't until I was a teenager and getting my first job that I was able to get out and start martial arts training. And through the first few years, I was very into it. I loved the thrill and the excitement of the challenge of everything. And I started moving in towards Western boxing, and I was really drawn to uh, that it was something that was kind of new to me. I hadn't been doing it very long, and it was extremely challenging, to
Mhm.
uh, have keep a strategy, deal with a fast pace, and you just had to get thousands and thousands of repetitions to be able to perform it at such a high level when you're playing with
Mhm.
amateur and professional fighters. And so it was something that I was going to the gym 6 days a week. I just loved the challenge of it. And at the gym that I was at, it's, a boxing gym is run a lot different than your traditional fitness classes in that it's not where you go in and there's one teacher and a group of students. Usually there's 4 or 5 coaches running around, and each one of those coaches might only have 3 or 4 fighters that they're working with. And one of the coaches that was at this gym that I was at was a very well-known coach. He had created national and world champion level fighters, and I really wanted to get to spend some time with him, but his fight card was full and he wasn't looking for any new fighters. And so I'd always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there and work hard and try to get him to notice me. And after I followed him around for about 3 or 4 months, he finally started giving me some tips and showing me a few things.
Mhm.
And something happened. He said something to me in the first few weeks of training with him that, one, kind of surprised me, and two, changed my life in many ways.
Mhm.
In that he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. Now, at the time, I was this young 19-year-old kid thinking, isn't Tai Chi for old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better fighter? And I had a lot of respect for him, though. And I started the practice. I started doing a daily ritual with the meditative arts. And not only did it change my life in many ways, through the years, I've had over 26,000 students come through my academy, and I have seen hundreds of stories of how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives. And that's
Mhm.
what's made me so passionate about trying to get this message out there. That's what motivated me to write my last couple books and
Mhm.
just try to help as many people as I can with it.
At what point did you find the martial art that you landed in and that you're doing now, or are you doing several? I saw in your bio that you trained extensively in several different arts and in several different countries. Is that correct?
Yes, so here at my academy, we have 4 adult programs. We have our Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program,
Mhm.
our striking program where we do boxing and Muay Thai kickboxing. We have our Eskrima program, which is a Filipino-based martial art. And then
Mhm.
lastly, we have our meditation program where we do a combination of things from breath work, sitting meditation, standing meditation, Tai Chi, and Qigong. And so those are kind of the four main approaches somebody could follow when they come here.
So, do your students typically take all of the programs, a few of the programs, or
No,
do they just focus on one at a time?
most, probably 90% of the students that come in focus on one program at a time. It's, unless you're doing this as a profession, it's kind of hard to devote more than 4 or 5 hours a week to something when you're
Mm-hmm.
working a full-time job. And to do that with even one art is kind of a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. Um, I'm really, really interested in the meditative program and the Tai Chi as well. I've only done one or two Tai Chi classes along the way, and neither one of them resonated with me, and I'm not really sure why, but I still am fascinated by the art, and I still encourage people. I've told a lot of my clients to go study Tai Chi because I think it is such a powerful art and such a powerful anti aging type of practice to follow.
Yeah, the meditative arts, a lot of times when people look towards a meditative practice, they think of it as, like Tai Chi, for example, where it's slow movement. And then
Hmm.
that's as far as they really get from it. Or when they think of a sitting practice, they think, oh, you sit and you count your breaths.
Hmm.
But with meditation, it's very deep and there's many different paths you can follow. So I break it down into kind of five main paths that you can
Hmm.
kind of gear your practice towards. And the first one is an athletic approach. And this is where we practice the meditative arts to help improve our performance, our awareness, our overall ability for recognizing how we use the body and connect to uh, the mechanics of the body as well
Hmm.
as our thoughts and our emotions and learning how to really fine tune this. And this is why so many professional athletes these days are turning to the meditative arts because it helps improve their performance. Even if it's only 5% or
Hmm.
2% even, it can really make a huge change at those top levels, and that's why you'll see basketball players, football players, runners, people from all different aspects taking into these arts to help improve their performance. Then you have the therapeutic side of the practice, which is good for longevity and helping deal with injuries. And a lot of people are kind of doing this for, as we age, they're doing it for fall prevention, they're doing it for
Hmm.
stress management. There's the medical side of the practice, which all of Chinese medicine is based off of Qigong theory, which is a very deep path to follow. Then you have the philosophical side of the practice, which is great for expanding your vision and seeing things from different angles and learning how to integrate strategy into your thought process. And then lastly, we have the spiritual side, which I think is what most people think of when they hear the word meditation.
Hmm.
And so, as you can see, there's a lot of different ways that we can start to create a practice around meditation.
Hmm. Are those five areas that you just told us about, is that similar to the five regulations for a healthier life, or is that something different? Because I
Yeah,
pulled that off of your bio.
those are very different. So the five regulations is a very interesting idea in basically any meditation practice you follow, whether it's Tai Chi, Qigong, sitting meditation, standing meditation, yoga, whatever it is, it has these underlying principles, which I call the five regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And they are regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And
Mm-hmm.
briefly, I'll kind of touch on what I mean when I say these different areas. The first one, regulating the body, basically means understanding our skeletal alignment, our muscular tension. And an
Mm-hmm.
example would be, think about a time maybe when you're sitting down in front of your computer and you've been there 3 or 4 hours and, your posture's sagging a little bit and you're feeling lethargic, maybe your neck's getting sore. And then another time when the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and you feel like you're on top of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these two different energetic states we're in control of all day, every day.
Mhm.
And so as we start understanding how to regulate our bodies, it helps us control our physical, mental, and emotional states. And on a
Mhm.
little bit deeper level of regulating the body is maintaining some kind of muscular structure in the body, some flexibility, eating a
Mhm.
healthy diet to maintain our energy levels, and getting an appropriate amount of sleep.
Mhm.
This is all different things that we focus on with regulating the body. Then we have regulating the breath, which is a very deep topic. And, all of uh, um, meditative practices use the breath strategically to get different outcomes. And oftentimes they'll refer to Qigong as the science of the breath because there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies. Now, when you can start understanding how to use the breath to get different outcomes, it adds a lot of value to your practice. Because there's so many different styles of breathing, we kind of broadly categorize them into yin methods and yang
Mhm.
methods. Yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style of meditations that work on that inward drawing of energy. And an example of a yin practice would be if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a
Mhm.
shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into our subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. So
Mhm.
if you want to use this style of energetic expression in our meditation practice, we can do longer inhales, soft retentions at the end of the inhale, and shorter exhales to help bring that energy inward, which is great for stress reduction, dealing with anxiety, with panic attacks, for boosting our creativity. There's lots of reasons why we would focus on this yin side of the breath. Then we have the yang side of the breath, which is more aggressive. And an example of that would be if you ever had to push your car or you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is to put tension in the exhale, maybe make the exhale audible. And this helps bring that energy outward. And you'll see a lot of athletes before an event, they'll chant or they'll use deep breathing to help build up that energy and create that mindset for the competition.
Mhm.
Now, once you understand kind of the science behind this, we can use these different breathing strategies in our ritual and active practices throughout the day. Then the third pillar is regulating the mind. And regulating the mind is oftentimes people think of meditation as this thing where you have to be in this blissful state of nirvana and have nothing bother you. And,
Mhm.
it couldn't be further from the truth. I've been studying the meditative arts now for 36 years, and I've been fortunate enough to train with some amazing meditation practitioners. And I have never once met anybody who doesn't get distracted. We all do. We're human. That's just the way it is. And so when we can understand this and realize that we're not failing because we're getting distracted in our meditation, we can use this as a positive because if you're sitting and practicing for doing a breathing practice for 20 minutes or maybe a movement practice like Tai Chi, and you get distracted, say 50 times during a 20-minute session, now every time you get distracted, we use our posture, our movement, or our breath to help bring us back to focus. You just got 50 repetitions of how to be off center and find balance. And if you do this every day, every month, every year, you start to develop this ability to, no matter what comes your way to throw you off balance, to find that center again.
Mhm.
There's this story that I enjoy about these two old monks, and they're walking down this dirt road, and there's a big rainstorm and it's muddy everywhere, and they come up to this big mud puddle, and on the other side of the puddles this beautiful little girl is standing there in a white dress and she's crying.
Mhm.
And the older monk, he hollers across the puddle and says, "Is everything okay? Can we help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." And so he rolls up his pant legs and he walks to the other side and picks her up, puts her on his back, takes her to the other side and sets her down, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road, And finally, the younger monk is just furious and he says, "You know we're not supposed to touch girls, but you did back there at the puddle." And he looks down and says, "You're still thinking about that girl? I left her back there at the puddle." And how many times in life do we have to get 2 miles down the muddy road before we
Mm,
realize we got to let this thing go? And so regulating the mind is a very important part of the practice. Then the
mhm,
fourth pillar is regulating the energy. And this is an extremely deep topic, something that we could spend hours talking about. But the basic idea is once you've reached a competent level in regulating the body, the breath, and the mind, we now have the tools to regulate the energy in the body, and we can send it through different circulation patterns in the body or draw it inward or extend it outward to affect our physical, mental, and emotional states. And then lastly, we have regulating the spirit, which is a very profound idea as well.
mhm,
And many meditation practitioners and monks will spend their entire life's journey working towards that ultimate stage of enlightenment. But as you can see, by understanding these underlying concepts or foundational principles within a meditation practice, that it can affect anything we do in life. And by integrating an evolving life practice with the meditative arts, it can make pretty much everything better.
mhm. Well, I think it would have a profound impact on your physical health, your mental health, and even disease prevention.
For sure. And there's so many studies and articles out there. You could just, do a Google search for the benefits
Mhm,
of the meditative arts, and you'd
mhm,
probably see a million different articles out there and some very reputable studies from Harvard Medical School and, very big institutions that are backing the benefits of this practice.
mhm. Isn't that I really love hearing that because it's so much better than taking a pill.
Very much, yes.
Yes, and very empowering. So, with all of what you were describing, do you include this information in your books? Is this something that you're sharing with your readers? Because it's fascinating information.
Yeah, so in my most recent book, The Yeilding Warrior, I go into a lot of these concepts. Also, on my online programs, we dive deep into this and teach people how to build an evolving life practice with these arts and find a way to follow what path they want to follow and what practices will help them get different outcomes
Hmm.
because it really is a science. And if you don't
Hmm.
understand it and you just try to jump in and follow, the next shiny object that appears in front of you, you're really
Hmm.
never going to get very deep within the practice.
Hmm. I love the name The Yielding Warrior. And I want you to describe a little bit more what the concept is about yielding acceptance rather than resistance and trying to literally fight. And I don't mean necessarily in a physical way with a partner. I just mean like fighting some of the stuff that life throws our way.
Yeah, so yielding to me is a very fascinating concept, and it's something that I've been pretty passionate about for many years, which is what motivated the book. Uh, so I've broken down yielding into three basic pillars. There's physical yielding, mental
Mhm,
yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the easiest one to understand. It's the idea that I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not
mhm,
trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. Now, it's obvious how this is beneficial in athletics because we're never in control of how big and strong our opponents are, and many times they're going to be stronger than us. And so,
mhm,
understanding this concept is very beneficial in pretty much anything physical we do. Now,
mhm,
in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed, the breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, while it may be a lifetime journey to really master those skills, from
Mhm.
day one, by integrating meditation into our lives, we start to see these things more clearly inside of ourselves. And this is where it starts to become very interesting, and also where we start moving into what I call mental yielding. Because when we see these things more clearly in ourselves, we also start to see them more clearly in other people. So,
Mhm.
say, for example, you and I are having a conversation, and I say something that unsettles you. If I notice it right from the first sign of imbalance, it's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place than if I'm
Mhm.
not paying attention to that. And pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to knock me upside the head. And so, learning how to use yielding in all of our interactions is extremely powerful.
Mhm.
One, we're being more considerate, which is something that we could all do more of. And two, it allows us to be strategic in our interactions and guide conversations to a positive outcome with the least amount of resistance. And this is beneficial in our relationships, in business, in sales, and negotiations. I mean, there's so many different ways we can apply this idea. Now, the last pillar of yielding is emotional yielding. And this is very similar to mental yielding. However, it's with our own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about oftentimes something will happen to us and we'll respond and we'll go down this path and we might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice.
Mhm.
But with yielding and our heightened awareness through practicing meditation, we're able to kind of sit back and be a little more centered when these things happen and not let our emotions get involved. And oftentimes make a more educated choice that saves us a lot of heartache on the other side. And I've been explaining this idea of yielding now for many years, running my academy for 30 years here.
Mhm.
And one of the most common things I'll hear people say is yielding makes a lot of sense. In fact, I do yielding all the time. Well, I would agree in that I think everybody does some degree of yielding all the time, whether they recognize it or label it that way or not.
Mhm.
However, it's kind of like if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years. I guarantee you that person would see things about the series of events and the
Mhm.
timeline that I know at least I would have no clue of. And meditation helps us see things inside of ourselves and inside of other people that I truly believe most people will go through life and never have any clue of without having this kind of a practice in their life.
It's just an amazing way to be able to pay attention not only to yourself, but to other people and your surroundings and all of the other things that are going to keep you safe in life and again, healthy, which is super important. But I have a
Yes.
great story about not yielding. And it just came into my mind as you were talking about this. It happened at the dojo quite a few years ago. There were two really big guys, and they were older, they were mature, but they were both built the same way. They both had the same mindset. And every time they would pair up and, try and work together, and, we don't really. We move very slowly, we move carefully, we're just learning new movement patterns. But they would get into position and they would just, each one of them would hunker down and they would push against each other with so much energy. Nobody was going anywhere, but I would just watch them. And I pointed out to another friend of mine, I says, look, you can just see the wheels going, you can see smoke rising, all of this
Mhm.
energy they're creating. If one of them would just step aside, the other one would go flying across the room and into the brick wall. But they never really got it.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to watch, but it was a powerful lesson for me, not only from a physical aspect, but just philosophical as well.
I think in today's society, that's the way that we're brought up. When we
Hmm.
see resistance, we try to overpower it and become the victor that way. When really, if we can strategize and we can see the most efficient way to get to the outcome we want, it can save us a lot of heartache and a lot of
Hmm.
effort.
Well, and I think that's just human nature is once we hit the brick wall, we want to just keep butting our head against the wall and wondering why we're not making any breakthroughs.
Yes.
Hmm. So, when did you decide? Okay, so you have been doing this teaching and practicing for over 30 years, 36 years. When did you decide it was time to write a book? Because writing a book is definitely It's a different kind of endeavor. And I would imagine that all of these principles that you study and you follow and you've just described to us would help in writing a book as well.
Yeah, once I started a meditation practice, it started opening up my creativity. And,
Mm,
as a younger guy, I was never into writing, I was never into music. And since I've started the meditative arts and had that be a major part of my life, my creative side has come out. And so I've got into writing, I've got into playing music, and
mm,
it's kind of one of the things that inspired me to do that. Most recent book, there's a little bit of leverage to get that one out, in that I wrote it during the first COVID shutdown
mm,
when we didn't know what was going to happen here at the academy. And so during those first time that we were kind of away, I was looking for, well, what can I pivot to? What can I change? And that's where I created my online meditation program. I wrote the Yeilding Warrior.
mhm.
My goal was to write 8,000 words a week for 10 weeks until I had 80,000 words. And I did that in 10 weeks. And then it took about a year and a half to edit it and fine tune it. But
Mhm,
so that was kind of my motivation for that.
mhm. Yeah, COVID, as miserable as it was, really opened up a lot of opportunities, as you said, to pivot and to go in different directions and branch out. So you do have an online meditation program. Is there any other programs that you offer online?
Yeah, so I have my basic program, which teaches, just individuals how to integrate the meditative arts into their life and kind of understand the science behind it and build an
Hmm.
evolving life practice around their lifestyle. But then I also have my teacher training program. So for people that maybe have a yoga studio or a martial arts academy, or maybe
Hmm.
they're life coaches and they want to learn how to deliver the meditative arts to, their clients, it's a way for them to understand how to do that, not just from a tactical standpoint, but also
Hmm.
from a business standpoint, and showing them how to really reap the benefits of having a pillar like this in their business. Here at my academy, I mentioned we have four different programs.
Hmm.
Our um, our meditation program, I only offer 6 classes a week, and it adds a substantial number to the overall revenue. It takes the least amount of effort to get new students in because you're targeting a market that's not common for yoga and martial arts studios.
Hmm.
Most practitioners in there are 20s, 30s, and 40s, maybe some a little over, but in the meditative practice, you get a lot of 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and even some
Hmm.
80s in there. And so it gives you a whole nother clientele that you can target. And the great thing is that it doesn't need to take up time in your busy hours either, because a lot of the older clientele like the day classes. So you can
Hmm.
have times where you're not spending away too much of your peak hours for the regular martial art and yoga classes. And so it's been it's really been a fun venture to be able to
Hmm.
show other business owners how to really capitalize on that kind of hidden gem that they have the opportunity to use.
Nice. Now, when you talk about like the scientific principles behind it and understanding the science behind meditation, is that something that you share with your students? And you're talking about like the principle of neuroplasticity? Um, just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the 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 science behind meditation and the qigong is extremely deep. Um, like I said, there's hundreds of different breathing strategies, for an example.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you look at a lot of practices, you can go out there and they'll tell you to breathe this way. But why do you breathe this way? How does that
Mm-hmm.
affect your body? How does that change your physical, mental, and emotional states? And when we start understanding how to use these different energetic practices and what they're actually doing, not just doing it because my teacher told me to, you start learning how to write your own prescription of the
Mm-hmm.
practices that you need and the practices that are going to help you accomplish whatever it is you're looking to by coming to the meditative arts.
Does it ever surprise you how often people hold their breath?
It's natural. Yes.
Hmm. Yeah. I see it all the time. And I'm a former respiratory therapist, so I'm very in tune to that. It's like, well, that's really interesting. Why are you holding your breath? So now you have the book, The Yielding Warrior. What is the title of your other two books?
So I have another book called How to Meditate.
Hmm.
And it's more just on the philosophy and kind of the mindset of the practice. And then I have another book on bullying, and I created it for my kids program here at the academy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And let me see, then my mind just went another direction and I lost track of it. Oh, yes, the videos or the instructional videos. Are those for martial arts, meditation, both? Just describe those and where people can, access those and take a look at
Yes.
them.
So we have a number of videos through the program for all of our programs, for our Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program, our striking program, our
Hmm.
Eskrima program. You can get access to those through our YouTube channels. So I have my Northwest Fighting Arts YouTube channel, which is more of the combative arts, and
Hmm.
then my Yeilding Warrior YouTube channel, which is more of the meditative arts. But then also I have all of my online video content for really learning how to build a life practice at the yieldingwarrior.com, where you can go and kind of see what's going on with that. I'm also giving away a free copy of my most recent book. If you go to the yieldingwarrior.com / book, it will you just pay for shipping and handling. We'll send you out a copy of the book.
Nice. Yeah, I did see that, and that is in the show notes already.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to people who are listening to this and they're thinking, okay, well, martial arts isn't for me, but the meditative practice sounds interesting, but I've tried meditation before and it just either never worked for me, or it never helped me, or it just didn't resonate with me. What kind of advice would you be able to give people like that?
I'm glad you asked that question because, one of the most common things I'll hear people say is either they don't have enough time or they tried meditation and it didn't work for them. And
Hmm.
so for me as a teacher, one of the most difficult things I've had to do is w- connect with people and show them the value in this practice and really ways to get them to believe that by integrating these arts into their life, they can really see some amazing life changes with this practice. And so I've come up with three things that I like people to
Hmm.
consider that I think is very helpful in getting the right mindset when they're coming to the meditative arts. And the first one is, why are you being drawn to the practice? What is it you want to accomplish by integrating a meditation practice into your life? And once you have that idea, think about 10 or 20 things that will positively change if you accomplish that goal, how it's going to affect your relationships, your work, your interpersonal communication, whatever that is for you. Then flip the coin and think that, if I don't accomplish that goal, what are 10 or 20 negative things that will happen if I don't do this? And this is important because it helps gives us the fuel that we need to find that consistency. We're
Hmm.
all human. We're going to wake up tomorrow morning or next week and the alarm's going to go off. It's time to get up and practice. And you're going to say, I'll do it tomorrow. I'm too tired today.
Hmm.
But if you get to the point where you're looking at this like something you get to do because you're reaping so many benefits from the practice, you
Hmm.
stop looking at it like a chore or something you have to do. And that mindset shift is very important.
Hmm.
Then the next thing is consistency. And this is so important. There's this story, this old Chinese story of the stone cutter, and he was a very sought out sculptor, and he would make these beautiful sculptures of animals and landscapes. And because he was so well known, there was people traveling from all around to come apprentice with him, and they'd follow him around for a few years and study with him to learn the trade. Well, every day the stonecutter, he would go down to the river to meditate and start off his morning this way. And one day he was walking along the river after he finished his meditation, and he had this vision of this big, beautiful Chinese mystical dragon that was made out of jade. And it
Hmm.
was so profound and so it connected with him on so many levels that he decided this was going to be his next project. Now, you can imagine finding a piece of jade this size would be very difficult. And so he spent the next few months traveling all over looking for the perfect rock to create this dragon. Well, finally, he found it. He brought it back to his shop and he spent days just walking around and studying this rock and trying to understand how this dragon would appear out of this big piece of jade. Once he finally started beginning work on the project, he placed his chisel in one specific place and just started tapping on it.
Mm-hmm.
And during the first day, hundreds, if not thousands of taps to this exact same place. A few days went by, thousands more taps every day. Nothing was changing. His apprentices were watching. A few more days went by, nothing changed. The apprentices started thinking, is he doing the right thing? Does he know what he's doing? Why doesn't he try something different? A few more days went by, and finally he tapped it, and this big section of the jade broke off the back. And his apprentice said, how did you know that that tap was going to break the stone? And he said, it wasn't that tap that broke the stone. It was the thousands of taps before that that broke the stone. And the apprentice got a little bit discouraged and he said, but there was nothing happening. There was no cracks. Why didn't you try something different? Why keep doing
Mm-hmm.
the same thing? And the stonecutter got down on his knee and he felt the smooth line that he just created by the separation of the jade. And he said, oftentimes the work that we're doing is happening beneath the surface and we can't see it with the naked eye. And not only are we benefiting beneath the surface, but oftentimes the one who's wielding the hammer is making these changes as well. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I like this story is that it so closely relates to the meditative arts in that we're practicing this breath work and these movement practices and studying these philosophical concepts that we don't often see changes day to day, but we're laying the foundation to reap the benefits further down the line. And it's so important to understand this idea of consistency because through the consistency, we develop this discipline, this integrity, this perseverance that not
Mm-hmm.
only affects our practice, but affects everything we do in life. And so, this is why this is the second thing that I like people to think about. And then the third and final thing is you need to find a guide. You know, there's millions of videos out there on YouTube. You could go look at this meditation practice and this breathwork series or this app that you can get. And it's very overwhelming. It's distracting. You're never going to reach any depth in any period of time by trying to be self-taught. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, I've had people come into the academy that have been self-taught and they've been studying 15, sometimes 20 years, and they'll come in here and see somebody who's been following a system that's further along after 6 or 12 months of training. You know, and our lives are short, your time is valuable. Having
Mm-hmm.
somebody help guide you down the right path so you're understanding what practices to take on and what path to even follow is very important. And so finding your why, understanding consistency, and having a guide are, I think, the three most important things for somebody new or even somebody who's tried the practice before and hasn't made it a lifestyle change yet.
I absolutely love the way you break everything down into like three or five or these pillars. It's so much easier to follow and it makes so much sense. So thank you for that. It really, I love the way you do that.
Yes.
So, where are you personally in your martial arts journey and where do you see it heading in the future? Because you've done this for 36 years. You know, as a practitioner, as a teacher, as still a student of the art, where do you see yourself maybe like in 10 years?
Well, I've developed a bit of a passion for writing, so I'm working
I
on my next
see.
book. Working on my next book right now, and I'm going to continue to follow that path.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason why I have been drawn to that is that, you know, while I mentioned we've had a fairly successful academy, you know, we've had
Mm-hmm.
over 26,000 students in the last 30 years come through the academy, which, as far as martial arts studios go, is pretty good.
It's really
Um,
good.
but I can only help so many people here at the academy. And what I
Mhm.
really want to do is get the message out there, help more people understand how to integrate these practices into their life. And I found that doing that through my online program and my teacher training program and showing people how to hand down these practices to other people and then also benefit from them and create a pretty amazing life with it.
Mhm.
I wouldn't change my career path for anything. A long time ago, my old boxing coach, he told me that you want to create a life and not make a living. And
Mhm.
understanding how to hand down these arts, I'm creating the life that I envision. I'm out there helping a lot of people. I'm fairly successful. I'm living the lifestyle I want to live. And if I can help other people do that, it's pretty rewarding.
Mhm. So, Jeff, where can people find you? How can they get a hold of you, connect with you? Just give us some of the links or some of the places. As I said, all of these links are in the show notes, but I really like for my guests to be able to articulate and tell them a little bit more about where they can connect and how.
Yeah, so the yieldingwarrior.com, you can check out my teacher training program, my online program for building an individual life practice. Also at the yieldingwarrior.com/book, you can get a free copy of my book there. And then also all of the social channels, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook.
Mhm.
If you go to the Yielding Warrior, you'll see me there as well.
Okay. So, do you have any final pearls of wisdom that you want to leave with the audience? You've given us a lot to think about and great information.
Yeah, so really take some time and think about the why, the consistency, and finding a guide.
Mhm.
Another little thing that is I found very helpful for me in keeping a positive mindset is every day I've got a list of um, values that I personally resonate with, and I have values that are draw me towards them and then values that I want to kind of steer clear of. And I pick one of those every day
Mhm.
from each column from where I want to be drawn towards and where I want to move away from. And I make the my towards values very easy to accomplish. So I used to do it where I'd have this value of say, um, whatever it was, like maybe it was health and vitality, for example.
Mhm.
But in order to achieve that value were these kind of distant goals, like when I get there, I'll value that. Where I've learned to really reward myself for everything I do every day that kind of puts me in that direction rather than having it be something that's off in the future. And then
Mhm.
my away from values, they're not easy to achieve. So if
Mhm.
and only if I do this, 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 and this, will I feel this feeling
Mhm.
or this value? And by doing that every day, it really helps put me in a positive mindset so I can go out
Mhm.
there and give my best to as many people as I can.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And Jeff, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Great information and really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. What great information. Please share this episode with everybody you know and really consider getting into a meditation practice because I really believe that we can make the world a better place when we understand ourselves better. We can understand each other. We can communicate a lot better, and we can make the world a better place. And I really believe that, we can use that right about now. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.